So let us start, and we know other people are going to join us, and we'll be admitting them as they come. So it's Laudato Si Week. Laudato Si Week. We couldn't let it go by without marking it and having a special event in our diocese. And Maureen and I, two members of JPIC, are welcoming you, along with Des, on behalf of the Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation Community and Committee in the diocese, of which Rupert, who's there wearing the glasses, living in Killarney, is also a member. So he's kind of welcoming you as well. Others of you are new to us, and others of you are friends and very close friends, especially in St. John's Care Creation Group and other places. And there are people on the screen that we're delighted to say we don't know. So that's great, because we love to see new people. And people maybe who are coming along to dip the toe in the water of this thing called Laudato Si. What on earth is it? So Maureen and I are going to host the evening. We'll both take different parts. Our special guest in one way is Bishop Martin Hayes, who's coordinating Laudato Si for the country, for the whole island, the church on the island. And we'll introduce him in a special way later. Now, we know that we have people from different parts, but I think we couldn't begin in a better way than begin with a little prayer. Of course, the prayer has to come from Laudato Si. And the prayer is going to come here on our screen, and we'll hear it from 2021. And the voice is an Irish voice. It's the same prayer that is at the very back of the book, The Prayer for Our Earth, now read for us by Jane Mellett. So Des.
A prayer for our earth. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace.
Amen. Welcome to those who are still continuing to join us. We just invite you to mute yourself for now so that we won't have any interference. But later there'll be the opportunity to make a comment or ask a question. Now you'll notice that Jane Mellett has taken on an American slang, a bit of an American accent. So it was a slightly different take than I introduced. That's that beautiful prayer taken from Laudato Si. Not the whole prayer, but some of the prayer. Now we know we have people here from different parts. We know we have Kilgarvan, with Drumtariff. I know we have Ballymackellicut, but that's where I'm from. We've got St. Brendan's Parish, and we've got St. John's Parish in Tralee, and we have Killarney Parish, and we have other places. And of course, we've got Kilmore. And we hope that others will join us. And we have Dingle. I see that Dingle has just joined us as well. So hello to Father Michael. Delighted Father Michael is with us. And Brian has flown all the way from, well, not really. He's come all the way from Brazil, but he now lives in Tralee. So Brian, we'll have to ask you to mute yourself as well, Brian.
My wings are not that good now.
So Brian, I just asked you to mute yourself for now.
Yeah.
And then...
sorry, Steve. Poor Martha can't find the link. Okay.
So she could sit beside you. Okay. So, okay. So just, yeah, that's great. So we have people here from different places, and that's the nicest part of it, because we're all needing to come together. And why are we needing to come together for this Laudato Si week? So Maureen, what is this Laudato Si week all about?
Yes, thank you, Sylvia. Laudato Si week is a week-long annual celebration marked this year from May the 22nd, last Sunday, to next Sunday, the 29th. And it's really to celebrate the 7th anniversary of Pope Francis's world-changing encyclical letter, Laudato Si, and the subtitle of that letter is On Care for Our Common Home. So this week has become a way for Catholics and all people of faith to unite in prayer and action and learn how the Laudato Si encyclical continues to offer a blueprint on how to care for all creation, human and non-human, how to tackle the climate crisis and the many other ecological and social problems confronting our world. The Pope's letter itself, the encyclical which Sylvia just held up there a minute ago, it's addressed to all people of good faith, not just to Catholics. And it's a worldwide wake-up call, helping us humans to understand what we are doing to the earth, our common home, what we're doing to ourselves, and more importantly, what we're doing to the poor of the earth, and of course, to young people and those yet to be born who are coming after us. What are we leaving behind? And just take one quote from Laudato Si. Our common home is falling into serious disrepair. We can see signs that things are now reaching a breaking point. And that evidence can no longer be denied, as we have heard George Lee highlighting on the TV news several times, that he's pointing out the dire warnings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and more recently from the World Meteorological Organization as well. So it's a serious situation, but Bishop Martin Hayes will be talking to us a little more about that later. So for now, let's listen to Pope Francis' invitation in this short video prepared for the 7th anniversary of his letter to us.
¿Qué tipo de mundo queremos dejar a quienes nos sucedan, a los niños que están creciendo? Motivado por esta pregunta, quisiera invitarlos a participar en la Semana Laudato Si. Renuevo mi llamado urgente a responder la crisis ecológica. El clamor de la tierra y el clamor de los pobres no dan para más. Cuidemos la creación, don de nuestro buen Dios creador. Celebremos juntos la Semana Laudato Si. Que Dios los bendiga y no se olviden de rezar por mí.
I must admit, every time I hear the Pope speaking like that, I get quite emotional. But this Sunday early, I got a text, WhatsApp, from Father Tim Galvin. He's a priest from Brosna, but he's a missionary priest in Kiltegan, where the drought is raging. He said, "Are you remembering Laudato Si week?" Well,
sorry, Sylvia, Pakistan. You said Kiltegan.
No, he's in South Sudan. So
South Sudan.
There's two priests. So did I say Pakistan? Whatever I said.
You said Kiltegan. Sorry.
He's a Kiltegan priest, and he's in South Sudan. And in the previous week, we were lining up our JPIC mission webinar speaker, and he's going to be a Father Liam O'Callaghan. He's a Columban out in Pakistan, and he said, "Can you wake up the people?" He said, "We can't breathe here. The heat is unbearable." And like, these are two Irish missionaries who maybe could come home, but they're choosing to stay. Maureen has sisters out there, religious sisters. She's a presentation sister. And we all have people who are out there. But of course, it's happening here too. And that's why we're delighted to welcome Bishop Martin Hayes, because a few years ago, he was appointed as the bishop to coordinate the response of the Irish Church and all of us to Laudato Si. Not an easy task, I would imagine. And so Maureen and I are going to ask him some questions. And then later there'll be a little opportunity for people to make a comment or ask a question. And then we're going to hear from two parishes who are doing a little something down there, out in Dingle, if they're here with us. And then we're going to have a few more little bits and pieces of things that we can all do, even this week. And then a look ahead to September, but that's a little bit further down the road. So, Bishop Martin, we're delighted you're with us. We'll ask you to unmute. And thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And my first question is just to tell us a little bit about yourself before you even took up this role in, I'll ask this first question, then Maureen will come in with 2 and 3.
Very good.
Before you took up this role in Laudato Si and for Laudato Si.
Very good. Very good, Sylvia. Thanks very much. Welcome to everyone. I feel a little bit at home because I'm back in Munster. I'm a Tipperary man. Of course, I won't give you the date of when I was born, but anyhow, my origins go back to Tipperary to I'm a farmer's son there from near the Horse and Jockey. Some of you may know it. I was ordained a priest for Cash and Limley Diocese in 1989. I would have come of a youth faith movement, namely Muintras Isa, which was functioning and is still functioning, but has its nucleus in Limerick and also has its roots down in the Dingle in Ballyferriter, down in Unbrew na Groiga, down in Kerry. So that's just a little maybe sense of where I come from. I was ordained, as I say, in 89. And in the year 2002, I would have taken a sabbatical year and would have spent some time in Berkeley in California and also in an ecological spirituality center in near the Hunter Valley in New South Wales in Australia. And there I would have touched base with what's called the New Story. And arising from that then, I suppose when Laudato Si came out there 7 years ago, I was back in parish work in Thurles in Tipperary as administrator in the parish there. And one of the things we were doing there in response to the publication of Laudato Si was to instigate the formation of an eco-spirituality group. And so what we would have been doing as part of that was studying sections of Laudato Si, and then trying to take some actions as a result of that. Now, very simple actions like planting a tree and publishing eco tips in the newsletter and that. So we were doing that in the, I suppose, I'm trying to remember exact years, the late 2000s and teens, I suppose. Yeah. Okay.
So you've been a busy man. And I hear that you're having to change now from hurling to football.
That's right, yeah. So
you're back in hurling and football territory now.
Yeah, well, the hurling is not going great with Tipperary at the minute, as you well know. It's the worst year since the 1980s. But anyhow, less of that. I'm getting used to changing from pucking the ball out to hopping the ball. And you're more familiar with hopping the ball, I know, there in Kerry. But anyway, and fair Tuesday. But anyhow, I suppose what we're coming on to, Sylvia, is the fact that 2 years ago I was appointed Bishop of Kilmore. And then I suppose arising from the fact that I had some involvement in an eco-spirituality group in Thurles. And then also, I didn't mention this, but at the Diocesan Lebanon and Cash and Limley, a few of us were organising workshops on Laudato Si here and there around the diocese, so as to develop awareness. So because of that, then I was asked to, I suppose, to take an interest in coordinating efforts with regard to Laudato Si. Laudato Si itself comes up under two headings in the Irish Episcopal Conference. One under the heading of the Justice and Peace Council, and also then the heading of the Laudate Si working group, which is of the Council for Catechetics within the Irish Episcopal Conference. So that's maybe bringing you up to maybe some. I hope that it responds to your question. Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. Bishop Martin. I think you like us to call you Martin, if I remember.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
So, Maureen, have you got a question for him?
Yeah, I just wondered, Bishop, and thank you for those introductory remarks on your own personal life. Was it the Irish Episcopal Conference that appointed you to that role of coordinator of Laudato Si for the Irish Church?
I suppose I've in part answered the question maybe. I suppose because of the fact that I'd been involved somewhat in Cashin and Lemley, at a level of organising an eco-spirituality group and also organising some workshops here and there throughout the diocese, that led to that. The Irish Episcopal Conference itself, shortly after the launch of Laudate Si, would have adopted it, of course, and they would have had a number of workshops. That was before my time. And also, in the meantime, the Irish Episcopal Conference would have decided to divest from investment in fossil fuels. That is the conference itself. And then also, since then, some individual dioceses would have undertaken to divest from investment in fossil fuels.
Yes,
okay.
That's right. Yeah, that's one of the big points about the Laudato Si movement, is trying to get institutions to divest their funds from any company who's promoting the use of fossil fuels.
Yes.
And I think our own congregation did that a few years ago as well. And the Columban in Ireland were the first to do it. Anyway, coming back to the Laudato Si, you're very familiar with the encyclical itself. But what do you think for you is the new and the most exciting teaching of the letter that has captured the attention not only of Christians, but of other faith leaders and even the secular world?
Well, I suppose there will be a number of different aspects of it. I suppose one of the things is the link between what's happening with regard to climate change and its impact upon the poor, and then the whole emphasis then within the whole document on interconnectedness and how we're connected to creation. Pope Francis would have highlighted our bond with creation, created by God, and then the harm that we're causing and how it's affecting the poor. Pope Francis, as you know, would have used kind of strong language referring to the harm, and by calling it the immense pile of filth, and then referencing our throwaway culture due to the impact of greenhouse gases arising from our use of fossil fuels. And he would be saying, in effect, that we're affecting water quality, we're giving rise to the loss of the biodiversity, and we're no longer giving glory to God. And one of the things that a constant theme as well that he's highlighting is that he's constantly asking us to question our notion of what we mean by progress, because what we mean by progress in the secular world, or in the world as it is leading to huge inequality. And we have to kind of find a balance between what we're doing in the world and our care for creation. One of the standout quotes for me in Laudato Si is a very, very simple 4 words. It's in paragraph 67, and it says, "We're not God." That, we kind of lose the run of ourselves, and in the world that we're living in, we have a sense, somehow we don't like to admit this to ourselves, but that we think we are God, that we've made so much progress, with technology and whatever, that we think that we're God. And I suppose in part, we as church are responsible for that, because we've often used the term that we like to exercise dominion over the earth. And that's one of the things I think that Pope Francis addresses, is that rather than exercising dominion over the earth, we're called to appreciate our connection with the earth. And one of the things that, for me as well, that Pope Francis highlights is he puts the books of the scriptures and the book of creation. He highlights the two of them. And we all know the value the word of God is to us, the scriptures. But he's also highlighting for us creation and how God speaks to us through creation. So it's like he's renewing the status of creation for us. He constantly comes back to the whole notion of the questioning of progress. And he highlights then as well that we don't have an infinite resource. We have a difficulty, I suppose, as a global community accepting that. I suppose also as a global community, we feel overwhelmed. And it's very difficult, to try and get a kind of a global consensus. I was happened to be over at COP26 this year in November over in Glasgow, and I attended some of the plenary sessions of the United Nations. And I found it, interesting, but very slow and pedantic, and it was difficult to try and get a sense of any progress being made. I know that they're genuine in their efforts, but the sense of and at the end of the day, I think I was a little disappointed with COP26, as many people were, because the consensus that was arrived at was the common denominator, which was least effective at the end of the day. So in trying to get everyone to agree, they agreed to less rather than more. However, but returning to Laudato Si, again, I'll return to the whole focus of Pope Francis upon the interconnectedness, upon the relationship between creature and creator. And that he believes will help us to reappreciate our sense of our appreciation of creation and the fact that we're not separate from it. Now, it's easy, obviously, to think that we are separate from it because many of us are living in urban environments. And we may not fully appreciate the fact that of the gift that we've received and that we have it on loan, and that what we're doing with it now, we're impacting the poor, but also impacting, as Maureen said earlier, we're impacting our future generations. Pope Francis, surprisingly enough, and this is one of the things that we focused upon, and I remember in some of our workshops on Laudato Si some years ago in Cashin Limley, he focuses upon the world of politics. And he says, politics is a good vocation. It's a noble vocation. Now, I remember saying that as part of a homily one time, and of course I got a reaction, which was one of maybe a certain glee. But he highlights that, yes, that if politics is pursued in the right manner, it obviously has a role. But I suppose he highlights that, but he also then highlights the role of religions. And I'd like to highlight that myself, because I know, again, going back to COP26 when I was over there, and as I say, I attended some of the plenary sessions and also some exhibitions on the part of various vested interests, including financial institutions and whatever. But also there were a number of events that were outside of the COP26. And one of those events was an interfaith event. It happened in what do they call a Muslim, a mosque, yes, a mosque. And it involved Jewish, Sikh, Catholic, Protestant, all different religions. And one of the things that I gained from that interaction was that while we may look to the world of politics, we may look to state institutions to do something, but religions of themselves, they can be working away. And of course, the other component of all of this, as well as having politics and religions, there is the world of science. Now, the world of science, and we saw the recent IPCC reports, they do their job very well. However, as a lady who is a champion of the environment over in England, Dr. Carmody Gray, she says that science of itself won't achieve it all. We can give us and maybe even overwhelm us with facts and maybe even frighten us. But it's faith communities, it's religions at the end of the day, groups of like-minded people with convictions who will affect change at the end of the day. Moving on, then I'd just like to highlight as well, and maybe something I'll be coming back to maybe in the later on. Pope Francis highlights that there's an emptiness of heart. that as a result of the way in which we're behaving towards the environment, and our preoccupation with progress, we're looking in the wrong places in order to seek satisfaction, and so we're empty as a result. We think, and it's a natural human inclination, that we think by having more we will be more, by accumulating, that we will have more. But Pope Francis highlights that that's not the way, and I'll come back to that later on. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Bishop Martin, for that. Putting before us the richness of Laudato Si and the challenges that are still ahead of us. But for the moment, we might just take a quiet pause to let what Bishop has said sink in while we listen to a quiet music.
Beautiful air of a Creus on Shiel. If you're in a choir, I'm sure you're used to singing it or listening to it. It's a beautiful Irish harpist. So we've given Bishop Martin a little rest, but I'm afraid we're going to come and ask him even more questions. So Bishop Martin, you led us very nicely into our next question when you referred to Carmody Gray, who was indeed one of the Trócaire speakers for Lent, Dr. Carmody Gray, and was a speaker in COP, that climate change conferences over in Glasgow. When you spoke about science not changing people's hearts. So what do you think the biggest call is to us? Because we're all coming from a faith perspective, or parts of a faith community. We're coming from different parishes. We've come here from the young adult group of the diocese. Maybe we're in a religious community. Or maybe we're dipping our toe in the water with this whole encyclical of Laudato Si. So what would you think the most important call is to us?
Thanks very much, Sylvia. I'd like to try and respond to this question in the context of what we're doing at the moment throughout the Church in Ireland, and that is our whole process of synodality. And most dioceses, all dioceses at this stage, and religious congregations and other bodies have completed an initial exercise, and putting together a submission. And one of the senses I have of it is that we have, it's the beginning. It is a beginning. And we have scratched the surface, as it were. We've linked in with people who are with us. And there's two aspects to that. There are people who are maybe have a more conservative kind of view, and then there are those who want to make maybe more progress. But we have touched on a small group of people. The challenge now is to reach out to those who have moved on from church and who are full of questions. And I think the real challenge for us then as faith communities is to make the link with the real issues of people, to reach out and engage with people in their emptiness. And this is what I was touching on maybe earlier, and their desire to fill it with having more, with progress as we understand it. And the preoccupation with trying to get everywhere faster, of absorbing information, money and property, which has left people on a practical level indebted to banks. So the challenge for me, and it includes obviously, care for the environment, but can we get to the root of our restlessness? And as I say, this is something that Pope Francis is calling for in the later chapters of Laudato Si. He's calling for an ecological spirituality, and he refers to the importance of education. He gives us hope by referring to the fact that young people are alert to it, and very often young people, even from outside the church, are looking to us for leadership, and they are maybe leading the way. So I suppose, to answer your question, again, can we get to the root of the restlessness and offer a spirituality that sustains people? Pope Francis, as I say, speaks of an emptiness of the heart there in paragraph 204, and calls us to embark on a new path of authentic freedom and to somehow address the twin challenges of our preoccupation with progress and the need to care for the earth. I think what we must do is, individually, personally, we must face our own desolation, the futility of accumulating more and more, and then to appreciate presence, beauty, and nature. And this is where a greater awareness and an education around the environment and the need, the desires of young people can offer hope. That's my attempt to try and answer that at this time.
Yeah.
Pope Francis talks about the need for ecological conversion, and then we speak about ecological spirituality. What do we mean? We need to ask each other as church, what do we mean by an ecological spirituality? And how do we develop such a spirituality that will engage with people in the midst of their everyday concerns? Because we have to acknowledge, and this comes true in synodality as well, that the environment does not come top of the agenda. It hasn't surfaced as a major issue. It will surface with certain people, which highlights that in my experience of parish and parish life, it's a small group of committed people who are concerned with the environment. Yes, we have to support them. And we must, and I'll maybe highlight as well that I think that we must constantly reach out to the people who are uninitiated with really very simple ideas, not to overburden them with too much information on care for the environment. We must keep it simple and live simply. So that's just my...
Thank you, Bishop. And I suppose it makes us think of even some of the things that we can start this week, even tomorrow. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. And Maureen, you have another question.
Yeah, I was just thinking when the Bishop was talking there about the environment, sometimes the environment sounds very impersonal. And you were also talking about the spirituality. And I think it's the spirituality comes from our appreciation and taking time to appreciate creation and not see it as an environment. We're all part of the environment. We can't see it out there. We need to actually appreciate that we are part of God's gift of creation. And I think we need to take time in silence and reflection out in nature, appreciating our interconnectedness. And if we don't do that, if we just all head stuff, we'll never get the spirituality deep down that we need to make the changes to our common home at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, you've given a sense of what you see happening in Ireland about synod and so on. In the light of the challenges facing the world and the call of Pope Francis, I think you've articulated that very well. But what would you like to see happening in our parishes?
Well, first of all, maybe to give a broader sense of what is happening, in Ireland. We can't put credit Trócaire, and a number of years ago, I've forgotten the exact year, I think actually it was the time of the World Meeting of Families, that they, took Laudate Si to heart and said, look, that we as Catholics, in order to fulfill our vocation in life, we have to address the issue of care for the environment. So we have to give credit to Trócaire, and through their Lenten resources over a number of years, they have been, evangelizing us with regard to care for the environment and making the link between what's happening in the developing world and what's happening with regard to industrialization. And I know Trócaire, and we have to give them credit as well for the Trócaire animators, the Laudato Si animators that are there, here and there around the country. And one of the things that we'd like to do, and I'd like to do into the future there with the groups of animators, is to compile a list of them and make them available to different dioceses, because where people are interested, that's the direction in which to go. Rather than asking dioceses to do something, find out where something is happening and let that grow and support each other. So you have the animators. There is also, I mentioned already, divestment. We have to acknowledge as well Eco Congregation Ireland, which is the ecumenical group consisting of the 5 Christian churches, Church of Ireland, Methodist, the Quaker community, Presbyterian, and Catholic. And they have the Eco Awards in a number of different centres around Ireland. There are also many different secular groups who care for creation. And then there's a new initiative, and I know there's a conference on it on next Thursday around Faith Invest. And that's, I suppose it's a version of divestment, and it's looking to different congregations and different Catholic institutions and other religious institutions of other religions, and to see how best they can use their monies and their resources to invest in an ethical way. We mentioned as well, of course, the Laudate Si action platform, which is organized by the Dicastery for the Promotion of Integral Human Development. And that's up and going. And one of the things we'd like to, I suppose, promote in this Laudate Si week is ask people to enroll on it. Now, there are some issues with it as well. It is that when people enroll, I found that people on the ground find that there are so many resources there that they're somewhat overwhelmed by it. So we have to find ways of making it applicable to smaller groups. What would I like to see happening? I suppose I go back to something that I indicated maybe early on, is that there are a group of very committed people around Ireland, like all of who are gathered here this evening, who are very committed and very enthusiastic around caring for the environment. And that's good. There are an amount of people who are not even touched by it. Going back to the group that are very involved, sometimes we can be overwhelming each other with the amount of information and think that we have to do something new each time. Very often, if we just repeat the simple things and put the message out about the simple things, i.e. about planting a tree, about creating a wild area, maybe in a parish, in a church grounds, doing simple things like that, keeping it simple, composing a list of eco tips that people can put into action in their homes or with regard to their transport. My theme would be, let's keep it simple so as to touch the widest number of people. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. I was just thinking when you were talking there about keeping it simple, another simple thing to do, which might have far-reaching effects, would be when there's an election coming up, to talk to your local politicians and ask them what they're doing about climate change, because they've said they never hear it mentioned on the doorstep. So like if people could commit to challenging them as well about making the bigger decisions, because all the small actions will be a help. But I think the urgency now is for bigger decisions made at the top level.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. But could we just take a few moments to open the conversation to the people who are here and allow them to ask questions or make comments for a few minutes? So the floor is open if anybody in the group would like to ask a question or make a comment. Thank you.
And just to repeat that if you want to do that, which we'd like you to do, just to unmute yourself for that moment. It can be a comment or a question.
You could raise your hand if you want to speak. So we'll invite you in.
Don't feel put on the spot.
Father Michael has his hand up there. Come in, Father Michael. There.
Thank you, Bishop Martin. Thank you for what you've said. When you mention those eco tips, I'm always fascinated. They can be very effective, but rather than the people at Dingle trying to come up with ours and the people of other parishes, I keep trying to find a little database of 40 words that can be put into a newsletter, and it's done. It's done once and it's done. So if there is any group that do that, I know there are some that might be at it, but if we got a constant supply for a newsletter, we'd be delighted. That's just the thought. Anyway.
Thanks, Mike. I know, Michael, that Trócaire, I think they could have had 100 tips at one stage. And I'm sure others, maybe Sylvia is part of our Laudato Si working group as well. And she may have other sources. But I know.
And the other that Michael would be, Father Michael would be very familiar with is the leaflet we bring out every season of creation.
Yes.
Which has 3 pages of tips.
Perfect. Good to know that.
Because that leaflet, even though it comes out kind of for the season of creation, 1st of September to the 4th of October, is relevant for the whole year, because it's telling you about pesticides, or it's telling you about changing the kind of laundry soap that you use, or it's telling you about looking after your water, brushing off, turning off your tap, when you're brushing your, they're like, sometimes they seem so stupid, but in fact, they're so basic. And maybe, when you have that little wake-up call and start to do that one little thing, it opens the door into other ones. So not to forget to dig out those.
Yeah, and for parish secretaries, if they are online available, that they can steal them and put them in, rather than having to retype them, everything to make it easy.
Yeah, and that's a really practical suggestion. So that's something that Maureen and I and Rupert and Des are noting, because we want to send you what is useful for you.
Because sometimes we are itching our head to put something into newsletters, and this is great importance in this. And if it's there, ready, go straight in. No thinking required. No more than 35 words.
Great.
Do that.
That's a great idea.
Anybody else like to ask a question or make a comment while you have an opportunity?
Maureen? Yeah.
Yes, Rupert. Yeah.
Thanks to Bishop Martin, for his very practical comments and simplicity, I suppose, as regards our efforts around promoting our common home, and to Father Michael there for what he's doing in Dingle. But I don't want this to sound kind of unfair or unjust, You get the impression that, the secular groups have taken this very much on board and are driving it, and I just wonder if the church as a body, even at local level, are really rowing in behind this and are, pushing this to the same extent. And I suppose those of us that are struggling maybe at parish level, at pastoral level, we can be very much on our own. And sometimes it's hard to get a prayer of the faithful, at Mass, on the newsletter or whatever, promote it or to highlight it. And there can be a lack of awareness sometimes, so when we talk about getting support, I think, the priests in the local area are very important to be seen, to highlight this, to raise this, to give it mention whenever they can. And it is then supporting the very key people at local level. It's a small thing, I suppose, but if that kind of element is missing, from the priest of the parish or whatever, it can be difficult. It can be a struggle, So I suppose all I'm saying is that I'd like more, a greater push, if you like, from the church or local church and all the churches maybe to be more united as we see some groups, secular groups, maybe about this issue. It's just a comment. Yes. I don't want to sound unfair now on that, but sometimes that's can be difficult, a struggle at very local level. The parishes that have priests who are interested, wonderful. It's great. I admire that,
Yes, thanks, Rupert. Bishop Martin, would you like to respond to that for a moment?
Well, I suppose one of the things I suppose I would say is, we're a different church now than we are even 5, 10, 15 years ago, with regard to the numbers of priests in parishes and the pressures that are on them. And I think we need to be conscious of that. And also, we're at a transition with regard to leadership styles of priests. I think for us to create an awareness of anything, and in particular with regard to awareness of creation, a priest has to be in a more facilitative role and has to identify the people. And I believe that there are people in every parish who are and who care for creation, and to enable them, to give them their head, and also maybe on a practical level to agree with their finance committee to give them a budget so they can get ahead with it. Because very often, and again, this often comes up, is why isn't the priest doing it? The priest is overwhelmed with so many different things that are happening in parishes. That's what I'm finding anyhow. And so on my own idea on it is that you ask the priest to identify the people who are who care for it, and give them a budget with which they can do very practical things, like, as I say, planting a tree or creating an eco space or whatever.
Yeah, so it's a supportive role rather than a leadership role. Tomas.
Yeah, it's more a comment than anything else. I've been very struck about the part of the war between Ukraine and Russia, the way that food is being used, and grain being stuck in silos and not being allowed by Russia to be exported from Ukraine, and how much people in the developing world depend on that grain. So Russia are using food and basic food as a weapon of war, not just against Ukraine, but against Africa and countries all around the world. And I suppose it's very much part of our care for the common home that we would share our food and we would share our resources, especially with those who need it so badly. And it's a real crisis for people in the developing world. It's about the basic need they have to have food to live on. And if they can't access that grain, if they can't access the sunflower seeds, what are they going to do?
It's a horrific prospect, definitely, what's facing our world because of Russia's attitude. It's very worrying, and it's hard to know what to do. But as you're saying, to maybe contribute to organizations which are trying to feed the poor, which are trying to provide resources and help them to be self-sufficient in whatever way they can. So it's about financially supporting them too, I suppose. Would anybody else like to respond to Tomas's question there? Alan? Did you put your hand up?
When I returned to Ireland, I was surprised in a way that something that had become important in England, namely in the English church, namely abstinence on a Friday, was not part of our church. And I think, given what has come up really, in terms of Laudate Si, it might not be a bad idea to somehow gradually try to reintroduce that as an idea. The other thing that I missed, and I know it happens in some places, but almost in every English parish, there would be a harvest festival. And that really, again, is something that brings together these sort of communities and particularly young people. Again, there are 2 family fast days, and I know that's not part of the Irish tradition. That's the way Cafford went. Trócaire went in another way. But I think there's a lot to commend something like Family Fast Day. I remember Father Michael telling us when you were in Glengarriff, I think you did a sort of a meal, a very, very simple meal for parishioners. And that reminded me of what we would have had in London, namely, a soup and bread and cheese after the walk on Good Friday. Things like that, I think, and I think we need some more imagination like that, because I fear our young people are not brought into the church in a way that these various activities can bring them into the church and bring us all together as community, thinking about what is important. Sorry, that's a lecture. Whatever. Sorry.
Thank you, Alan, for those ideas. I was thinking of Trócaire during Lent as well, people contributing to the Trócaire collection, but maybe if they fasted first, did some fast and give the money instead to Trócaire or to other organisations. That's another way. There are plenty of ideas, but it's a matter of maybe suggesting them. Maybe we can do that sometimes as JPIC as well, encouraging something like that.
And that's
thank you all. Sorry, Sylvia.
Sorry, Maureen, that's a creative idea, the idea of the simple meal. And it's also just an opportunity for people to come together, which people, of course, love to do. Like we love our come together for cups of tea, to come together over a simple meal, having a walk in nature, after a walk in nature, or walking the way of the cross as they have done in nature with the children in St. John's this Lent. So thanks to everybody for the contributions. And now, I don't really want to put Father Michael Moynihan on the spot, but I might be slightly putting him on the spot, because there were going to be 2 people who are going to share a little. I'll share a little of it, because I have the job of keeping my little eye on this clock. And different parishes have now a care of creation contact person. Now that hasn't really been as maybe dynamic, or whatever the word might be, fruitful as we would like it to have been. So they're certainly not all here this evening. And, we can see that a number of parishes are here, to which we're absolutely delighted, but there's a number that are not here, which I suppose is a challenge to us, how to reach out and how to invite them to become a part. So in the greater pastoral area of Dingle, there are 2 particular parishes that did something wonderful, simple, like Michael Moynihan has already spoken about. Would you say anything, Michael, about camp and what they did in camp? Now, Breed Nivoran was going to say it this evening, but I don't think she's present.
No, in recent months, about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, a few people in camp decided that they would plant some apple trees in the church grounds. And we did, maybe about probably 2 months ago, but they're blossoming and they're beautiful. The other thing is we have let some of the grass unmown, but kind of cut other bits of it so it don't look as though it's being abandoned. And we have a little sign up saying managed for nature. The other thing they have done in camp is that exactly managed for wildlife. The other thing they have done in camp is that little biodiversity group has really taken off, and they're going for walks, I think 2 or 3 days a week to different up mountains on the seashore, which is great. And now the danger is they're working with the converted, but at least they're nourishing each other and they're letting it open to others. So that's what's happening in camp. So there are nice things happening in the church. but there are good things happening otherwise as well. But it was nice that when people come, but there's a bit of resistance in not cutting the grass. People that, I want to cut the grass. No, we'll let you there because it's being managed for nature. But like, and then after a while, people wonder and they'll inquire and they'll eventually get it, hopefully, you know. And what they're going to talk about another place, well, that Lisbon.
Yeah, so the other little place, and Sharon Mihulavon, when she was with us at our contact Zoom, she told us that she and another were going to do a little biodiversity audit in the Lispole, in the grounds of the Lispole parish.
Yes. So what we've done in that place is we have again let the grass uncut, and they did an analysis of the flowers, and there's some beautiful flowers. Surprisingly, the flowers have trained themselves to grow quick enough that the cut won't affect the flowering. You know? So some of the flowers will only ever grow about 4 inches. They're trained that well now at this stage. But so they're little things, but we do the best we can. But the most important thing is buy-in from the community. I could decide to do that myself in the morning and say, lads, we won't cut the grass at all, but it wouldn't be as effective as if a lot of people know what's happening and let it come from them. You know, that's the thought.
And leaving the grass uncut actually is helping pollination. That's the important thing.
Oh, huge.
And all the insects, when they are born in the springtime, they need ready access to food. And that's from the dandelions and all the stuff that we're cutting down all the time. So it's about thinking of all our relations in creation, the smaller relations, that they need to be fed as well. So thank you, Father Michael.
And so there's this little booklet that many of you may have already seen. You can get it as a download from the pollinatorplan.ie, or if is anybody particularly interested, I'm sure we could use a stamp to send it out to you. It's it's bigger than an A4, but it speaks about exactly what Father Michael was speaking about. You can have a short flowering meadow. So that's like just 6 weeks. So the flowers have like daisies or dandelions or lady's smock, you know, cuckoo flower. They have a little chance to grow up, to feed the bees, and then they can be cut. And maybe your lawn doesn't have to be like a golf course. It just can be a higher cut. So that's what I know the caretaker in Ballymac now is doing, a higher cut. It's just one of the little things. And what are the things you're going to put in? Well, obviously, it's probably better to put in things that are good for the bees. And what are they? And there's lists of them in that book, or it's a booklet, really. So that's a really simple little thing. The other is your library is a resource. So say, for example, there's these things called, I don't know if it shows, or I have it upside down, which doesn't help. It's called a spotter sheet. I picked these ones up in Declan's territory, in the Kilorgan Library. They're in the Tralee Library. There are 3 beautiful ones, things to spot in an urban garden, in a bog, on a hedge, whatever they are. And you can have them, you know, up in a window. We happen, because I have a foot in both parishes, in the parish of St. John's, we have a window there, which keeps getting decorated with messages. So we had the spotter sheets up for Biodiversity Week last week. And at the moment, of course, there's a beautiful little display for Laudato Si Week. So they're just some of the little simple things. And that's reminding us that it is still Laudato Si Week. So that beautiful prayer that was at the beginning, wouldn't it be wonderful that each of us would decide we'll pray it every day for the rest of the week? You know, then we might keep praying it, or a little part of it. Or maybe part of that could go into the parish bulletin, even a little piece of it. Because the whole prayer, it's the prayer for our earth at the back of Laudato Si, is quite long. And we'll send it to you after this Zoom as a little thank you. Maybe a little phrase from it could just go at a base of a bowl of flowers, or, you know, in your church, in your sacred space, or at the foot of a statue at the May altar. I mean, Mary loves to be decorated with beautiful flowers, and why not have flowers from along our hedgerows? These are small actions. But of course, we know that the year is marching on. And then, as we come to the end of it, we know that the season of creation will come in September. So one parish is highly organised. That's because they have a little committed group of which Declan is a part, Declan Crowley. And they have a little event planned. And of course, we possibly could all go, even though we mightn't be from mid-Kerry. So, Des, I think you have a slide that shows what they have planned. They got in early. So they're having an open morning on Saturday, September 24th. They're having a little welcome and introduction. Sinead is from the Parish Pastoral Council. Then Declan is going to talk about the garden, which is a wonderful garden at the side of the parish house. They have a speaker, Jane Mellett. Obviously, they did get in early, and there's an opportunity for a chat. And then the refreshments. And I was there for them last year, and they were wonderful. They came via a horse box. And Father Kevin paid for us all to have a lovely cup of coffee. And then we all had an opportunity to wander through the garden. And I have an idea, Maureen, that you have one other slide that you could show.
Yes, yeah.
Because of course this is a garden for pollinators. It's also a garden for people, because we all have to eat. And so I think, Declan, this is a wigwam of beans. Is that right, Declan?
Mm-hmm.
You can see there's beans.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct, Sylvia. We put it up there just one Saturday morning lately. Could I briefly describe what's in the little bed there?
Do indeed. But then we better let people off. But please, Declan, say what's in that bed.
In the fore portion, there's heritage oats.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after, there would be runner beans from Central America. Further on, just beyond the little wigwam, there are sunflowers from Ukraine.
Oh.
And a little further on again then is barley. So they have plenty to occupy ourselves with, but also plenty to gaze upon. That's it.
Thanks, Declan. You can see the church in the background. Of course, you don't have to wait till September. So if you're passing through Gilorglan and you're outside St. James's Church, why not park there and have a little wander in? Now, just before Bishop Ray gives us a vote of thanks to everybody who's taken part, especially Bishop Martin, but everybody who's come, remember, any little help you need from the JPIC committee, we're delighted to give. The way into that committee is to contact Des Bailey at dioceseofkerry.ie. But remember, you'll have local people nearby who'll be super, and they might be a Tidy Towns group, a GIY group. Don't feel you always have to stay with the faith community. Invite them to share, because they will love to partner with you as they do with us in St. John's Care of Creation Group. So, Bishop Ray, a final word from you.
Good evening, all.
Evening, Bishop.
And it was mentioned a word of thanks and a word of encouragement. So first, a word of thanks and to Bishop Martin, and welcome back. Welcome down south. My own home is halfway up to Cavan, well, just over halfway up to Cavan and Athlone. But thanks, it's good to be here. It's good to gather. We could be bigger, but what we have, and let's all find a friend to share it with. Just a word of encouragement. You know, that I do think to win hearts and minds is important still. Martin mentioned early on that a lot of people don't believe in it, or a lot of people believe in it when it impacts on others. When it impacts on themselves, they don't believe in it. Believing, their own needs stops them, prevents them from seeing anybody else's needs that might overlap. You know, I say it is more and more worrying each year. You know, the last year, 18 months, it's frightening. You would think the oceans are big enough to look after themselves. I think they're powerful enough to look after themselves, but to hear that they're full of plastic, in a huge, huge way, and it's significant. And to hear that the coral is damaged, we're hearing more after more after more. So it's a huge challenge. And I think we've got to win hearts and minds. And I think the simplest presentation is, as an uncle, I've seen my sisters and brothers and, what they wouldn't do for their children. And it's universal in terms of parenthood, to help the children grow to be strong human beings, well-rounded, developing their talents, and to give them the education and to orient them towards, a career, like basically looking after a community, that they'd have a home in the future, that they'd have a career. There's nothing you wouldn't do for them. And maybe that's key because, the biggest letdown we could have for our children is to give them a permanently damaged world. That the children are born in the last 10 years. From 2070 on, they'll be the age I am now. What will the world be like for them? What good is education? What good is good jobs if the world is significantly damaged in a way that can't be easily repaired? I think just to appeal to that what are we handing on to the next generation? And how will children and grandchildren feel? Nephews, nieces, grandnieces, grandnephews, how will they feel? If the world is significantly damaged in 2035, 2040, 2050, in all the different ways it could be damaged. And such a huge percentage of the world is living on the coast. And the rise in sea alone could prevent all of that. So I just think that to win hearts and minds, to realise that when our government and when the EU says we must do things, to say, well, we'll try and do them. We'll try and agree on it. Whereas at the moment, most people are saying, should we play puck with that for 5 years? And we'll frustrate it. So just that simple image that what we hand on to the next generation. And the really, really serious thing is if we'd hand on to them a significantly damaged planet. And the original Laudato Si is praised be, and it's the canticle of St. Francis, who valued the sun and the moon and the earth and water, and air. And if we could appreciate it as much as Francis appreciated it, what was it? Is it 800 years ago? But I do think if we could convince adults that the serious issue of what we hand on to our children, the most fundamental thing on earth, our common home, planet Earth. So thanks to all and encourage all, and to win hearts and minds, to say we have no choice to cooperate with our governments. We have no choice to be part of the EU. We can't play games with it. So thanks to all. Win a few friends, bring in a few more parishes, and let's have a good September.
Yes. Thank you, Bishop Ray. And now is the time. Let's enjoy and celebrate and get active, because we have a beautiful song and the words are going to come up on the screen, and maybe you can sing them in your heart. And tomorrow,
Before we do that, Sylvia, I would like to say a word of appreciation to Bishop Hayes again for coming and spending the time with us. We really appreciate your words of wisdom. So thanks again. And thank you to Des as well, our technician in the background. our diocesan pastoral officer. So Des, thank you for keeping the show on the road in the background. And the song we're going to have as a closing song is called Let This Be the Time. And the words will be on the screen in case you can't hear the words of the song. But let it be the time when we'll heed Pope Francis's wake-up call and the dire warnings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the World Meteorological Office, which are warning us that we haven't that much time left before the awful things will happen to us. We needn't wait till the next generation. I think it's going to be in our own generation. So, Des, will you just lead us in the song? I will say thank you to everybody for joining us as well.
Let this be the time.
Your people rings out from each steeple. Let this be the time when our praise and devotion sets lives into motion. Let this be the time when the heart of our labor promotes love of neighbor. Let this be the time when the care for each nation brings peace to creation. Let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, raise a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time.
When we see in each face those we need to embrace. Let this be the time. When we turn and forgive those the world won't let live. Let this be the time. When our care for creation becomes our vocation. Let this be the time. When our deeds and good actions become our true passion. Let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, raise a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time. When the voice of the Spirit transforms all who hear it, let this be the time. When we turn from obsession and needless possessions, let this be the time. When we give recognition to the one true physician, the healer who bears all our pain. When we stop and remember that you are our God, let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, raise a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time. Come and tear down the old ways and build up the new. Be the God of our promise, all hope rests in you. With the fire of your spirit, raise a kingdom of truth. Prepare us for action, let nothing distract us from you. Let this be the time. Let this be the time. Let this be the time.